The remarkable story of Anne Bonny, a pirate who defied convention. In the autumn of 1720, the Caribbean waters churned with possibility and danger as a merchant vessel crossed paths with the pirate sloop, William. The crew of the merchant ship likely expected the usual sort of pirates, hardened men with cutlasses and pistols. Instead, they found themselves facing two of the most remarkable pirates of the Golden Age, Anne Bonny and Mary Read, who according to witnesses fought more fiercely than any of their male counterparts. Standing on the deck of their ship, red-haired Anne Bonny had already earned a reputation that would outlive her numerous male contemporaries. Behind the legends and tall tales stands a true story even more compelling. A young woman who rejected the suffocating constraints of colonial society to forge her own path. Born in Ireland and transported to the American colonies, Anne Bonny would eventually make her way to the pirate haven of New Providence, where she joined the crew of Calico Jack Rackham. What followed was a brief but extraordinary career that challenged every convention of her time. While many of the details of her adventures have been lost to history, the documented facts of her life paint a portrait of someone who dared to live by her own rules in an age when women's lives were strictly controlled. This is her story, separated from myth, but no less remarkable for its truth. Anne Bonny, from rebellion to maritime legend. The rolling hills of County Cork, Ireland concealed a scandal at the turn of the 18th century. William Cormac, a respected lawyer, had betrayed his marriage and his position in a way that would alter the course of maritime history. His relationship with his housemaid Mary Brennan had produced a daughter, Anne, whose fierce temperament would match the circumstances of her birth. The exact year was likely 1698, though even this detail is shrouded in the mists of time and conflicting records. The scandal might have remained contained had William's wife not discovered the truth and cast them out. Rather than face disgrace in Irish society, William Cormac made a bold decision that would shape his daughter's destiny. He would sell his practice, convert his assets to cash, and sail for the New World. The family landed in Charleston, South Carolina, where William's legal expertise and brought-over wealth quickly established them among the colonial elite. Young Anne, despite her illegitimate birth, was positioned to enter colonial high society. But the pretense of gentility never sat well with Anne. Colonial records and contemporary accounts paint a picture of a young woman who rejected the traditional path laid before her. She was described as fierce and courageous, with a violent temper that manifested early. One account tells of her stabbing a servant girl with a table knife, though like many tales of her youth, this story walks the line between documented fact and colorful embellishment. What is certain is that Anne's early years in Charleston were marked by increasing rebellion against her father's attempts to establish himself as a respectable plantation owner. The carefully constructed facade of their new life began to crack under the weight of Anne's refusal to play the role of a proper colonial lady. When a young sailor named James Bonny caught her eye, she made a choice that would set her on the path to infamy. She married him against her father's wishes, effectively cutting herself off from her privileged position in Charleston society. The marriage to James Bonny was her first act of open defiance against the constraints of her world, but it would not be her last. The respectable life her father had tried to build in the New World had crumbled, but Anne Bonny was about to build something far more extraordinary in its place. The waters of the Caribbean beckoned, and with them a destiny that would earn her a place in the annals of maritime history. Anne Bonny and the Call of Nassau, a pirate's journey. The port of Nassau in 1716 was unlike anything Anne Bonny had ever seen. The capital of New Providence Island existed in a perpetual state of controlled chaos, where the line between legitimate merchant and pirate blurred with each passing ship. The air hung heavy with the smell of rum, salt, and opportunity. This was no Charleston, with its suffocating propriety. This was a place where fortunes could be made and lost between sunset and sunrise. The marriage that had brought Anne to these shores was already showing signs of strain. James Bonny, for all his seafaring romance, had proven to be little more than a small-time informant for Governor Woodes Rogers, reporting on pirate activities for modest rewards. Historical records show that Anne quickly found herself drawn to a different crowd, the privateers and pirates who frequented the bustling taverns along Nassau's waterfront. Among them was a charismatic figure who would change the course of her life, John Calico Jack Rackham, so named for the bold, striped clothes he favored. Rackham cut a distinctive figure among Nassau's rogues. Unlike the brutish captains who ruled through fear alone, he had earned his position through cunning and charm. Contemporary accounts describe him as a skilled navigator who preferred strategic raids to needless bloodshed. What drew Anne to him wasn't just his flamboyant presence, it was the promise of a life where she could be more than a bystander to adventure. The historical record becomes crystal clear in 1720, when Anne made the unprecedented decision to abandon her increasingly strained marriage and join Rackham's crew. The act was doubly scandalous, not just for leaving her husband, but for choosing to live openly as a pirate. Court records from the time indicate that she refused to hide her gender aboard ship, a radical departure from the usual practice of female pirates who disguise themselves as men. The die was cast. Anne Bonny had crossed a line from which there would be no return. The respectable world she had left behind would soon learn just how far a woman would go to seize her own destiny. Nassau's golden age of piracy was nearing its end, but Anne Bonny's legend was just beginning to take shape. Partners in Piracy, the tale of Anne Bonny and Mary Read. The deck of Rackham's sloop was a world that played by different rules. Here, in the summer of 1720, Anne Bonny established herself not as someone's wife or daughter, but as a pirate in her own right. Court testimonies from captured merchants describe her with a mixture of fear and fascination. A woman who wore men's clothes and carried pistols, actively participating in raids rather than remaining below deck like the few other women who occasionally sailed with pirate crews. The arrival of Mary Read aboard Rackham's vessel added another extraordinary dimension to this tale. Read, who had spent years living as a man in both the British military and various merchant vessels, found in Anne a kindred spirit. The two women formed a formidable partnership that caught the attention of every ship unfortunate enough to cross their path. According to witness accounts from their eventual trial, both women were noted for being very profligate, cursing and swearing much, and very ready and willing to do anything on board. The crew's hunting grounds stretched across the Jamaican coast, where they specialized in taking small vessels and fishing boats. This was not the grand-scale piracy of popular imagination. Historical records show their prizes were modest but consistent. They captured a schooner here, a fishing vessel there, slowly building their reputation along the Caribbean trade routes. One documented raid involved the theft of fish and turtle from local fishermen, while another saw them commandeering a small sloop off the coast of Cuba. Yet even in this golden moment of freedom, storm clouds were gathering. Governor Rogers of the Bahamas had declared war on piracy, offering pardons to those who surrendered and the noose to those who refused. The era of Caribbean piracy was drawing to a close, and with it, the brief window of opportunity that had allowed two remarkable women to seize their own destiny on the high seas. The sands in the hourglass were running out for Anne Bonny and her companions. But before their final curtain would fall, they would give the Caribbean one last, unforgettable performance, a battle that would secure their place in maritime history. Anne Bonny's Last Stand, the final battle of 1720. On the night of October 22nd, 1720, the moonlit waters off Jamaica became the stage for Anne Bonny's last stand. Captain Jonathan Barnett, commissioned by the governor of Jamaica to hunt pirates, had finally caught up with Rackham's sloop. The pirate hunters came upon the crew while they were anchored at Negril Point, celebrating their recent captures with a raucous party, a fatal mistake that would seal their fate. What happened next is preserved in remarkable detail through court testimonies and official records. As Barnett's vessel approached, most of Rackham's crew, addled by drink, retreated below deck. But Anne Bonny and Mary Read stood their ground, cursing their cowardly shipmates as they loaded weapons and prepared to fight. According to multiple witness accounts from the trial, the two women called out to their hiding companions to come up and fight like men, and when they refused, fired shots down into the hold, killing one or two of their own crewmates. The fight was fierce but brief. Despite the women's resistance, Barnett's better armed and organized force quickly overwhelmed the pirate sloop. The entire crew was captured and transferred to Spanish town Jamaica, where they would face trial for their crimes. During their imprisonment, a detail emerged that would add another layer to this extraordinary tale. Both Anne Bonny and Mary Read declared themselves quick with child, invoking an old English law that would stay their executions. The trial itself, which began on November 28, 1720, provides our most reliable window into these events. The court records paint a vivid picture of Anne's defiance. When Rackham was granted a final visit with her before his execution, she reportedly told him she was sorry to see him there, but if he had fought like a man, he need not have been hanged like a dog. These words, preserved in the colonial court documents, would become her most famous utterance. While most of their crewmates faced the gallows, including Calico Jack himself on November 18th, the fates of Anne Bonny and Mary Read diverged into mystery. Read died in prison, likely from fever, while Anne vanishes from the historical record after receiving her stay of execution. Some speculate that her wealthy father ransomed her from jail, but like so much of her life, her final chapter remains tantalizingly out of reach, leaving us only with the documented story of a woman who dared to seize her freedom in a world determined to deny it. Anne Bonny, a rebel of the golden age of piracy. The story of Anne Bonny blazed across the Atlantic world in 1721 thanks to newspaper accounts of the trial that circulated in Jamaica, the American colonies, and Britain. While most pirates faded into obscurity, Anne's tale proved irresistible to the public imagination. By 1724, when Captain Charles Johnson published his influential A General History of the Pirates, her exploits had already taken on mythic proportions. Johnson's account, our principal source of information about Anne's life, reveals fascinating details about how her contemporaries viewed her. The author dwells particularly on her intelligence and fierce independence, noting that she was not altogether so reserved in point of chastity as most women of her time, a backhanded compliment that actually highlights her rejection of period social constraints. His description of her as a good figure and pleasing features, but also robust nature, suggests a woman who defied easy categorization, even by the standards of pirate literature. The void left by Anne's disappearance from historical records proved fertile ground for speculation. Throughout the 18th century, stories circulated of sightings: a red-haired woman in Port Royal, a wealthy widow in South Carolina, a tavern keeper in Louisiana. None can be verified. What's particularly intriguing is how her image evolved in popular culture. While male pirates were typically portrayed as mere criminals, Anne Bonny was increasingly depicted as a rebel against social conventions. Colonial records from the period reveal an unexpected detail. Following the trial, several women in port cities were arrested for dressing in men's clothes and attempting to join ship crews. While their names are lost to history, these incidents suggest that Anne's brief career inspired others to challenge the rigid gender roles of their time. Her story had become more than just a tale of piracy. It was now a symbol of defiance against the established order. This is where verifiable history ends, but Anne Bonny's influence persists in maritime lore. The documented facts of her life: a woman who chose freedom over security, who fought alongside men as an equal, and who faced death with unflinching courage, continue to capture imaginations centuries after her disappearance. She remains one of the most discussed figures of the golden age of piracy, not because she was the most successful pirate, but because she dared to write her own rules in a world that offered women precious few choices.